Welcome back, strong, beautiful, wise woman. You believe in God, but do you believe Him? Believing God changes everything. In good seasons, we're thankful for His kindness. When we're thrust into a terrifying trial, though, trusting and believing God becomes our hope in life. Because generally, when we trust someone, we follow their ideas and suggestions with ease. Do you trust what God says in our key verse? Do you believe these words, this encouragement, this promise that our daughters will be pillars sculpted after palace style? Hey, let's refresh. Consider Scripture's definition of daughters as pillars in several translations. Our daughters may be as pillars sculptured in palace style. That's the New King James. Our daughters may be as cornerstones polished after the similitude of a palace. That's the King James Version. Our daughters will be like pillars carved to adorn a palace. That's the NIV. And then, when our daughters are like cornerstones fashioned for a palace, those are the words from the New American Standard Bible. How lovely, how praiseworthy. Each translation refers to a palace. What does this tell us about what God has in mind for His daughters and their place in His kingdom? What can we become with God's help? Further commentary says this about Psalm 144:12. One person said, "The comparison is a very beautiful one, having the idea of grace. The skill of the sculptor is most abundantly lavished." And another person said, "Strong and beautiful and adorned with all the ornaments belonging to their gender." Still another said, "Daughters, prudent, virtuous, healthful, industrious." And another said, "Polished cornerstones both beautify and connect together the parts of a magnificent structure." Still another said, "Daughters unite families as cornerstones join walls together, and at the same time they adorn them as polished stones garnish the structure into which they are built." Home becomes a palace when the daughters are maids of honor and the sons are noble in spirit. Polished, removing the grit, the dark spots, smoothing out the rough areas and dark texture. By definition, polished is something or someone who is made smooth, characterized by a high degree of development or refinement, free from imperfections, or characterized by elegance and refinement. Do we have rough areas in our life to smooth? Do we sometimes feel like someone is cutting us during a painful season? One way a woman can become polished, that is, shiny and refined, is by taking in God's word, adjusting herself to it, and living it out. This may include being subjected to a painful chiseling process. When I'm suffering or going through a challenging season, I say I'm in a trial or darkness or a storm or maybe a fire. In Psalm 69, verses 1 and 2, David used the word mire to describe his pain. What word do you use most often to define yours? The onset of a trial may surprise us, but it shouldn't surprise us. James 1 verses 2 through 4 tells us, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." When, not if. Knowing trials are inevitable doesn't make me like them any better. However, within this passage, we find purpose for trials, to make us perfect and complete. The Greek word for perfection is teleos, and it means completeness. Perfect faith in God makes us spiritually mature. To complete this process, we'll need endurance. Romans 5:3 and 4 tells us, but we also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, and perseverance, character, and character, hope. Christ followers gain additional endurance with each trial, which produces a deeper, stronger level of faith. Endurance is increased when we trust God for a good outcome. And 2 Corinthians 4:17 and 18 tells us, for our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory, which we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. Now, these passages encourage me and give me hope. Before we dive deeper, though, the James 1:2-4 passage, various trials, is translated in the King James Version with the term divers temptation, which means various temptations, those coming from the devil as he tempts us to do what we think will bring us pleasure, and those coming from our selfishness and ignorance. We can be tempted to worry, to fear, or doubt God's love. Definitely not pleasurable experiences. God never tempts us to sin, but because He loves us so much, He will allow testing for the purpose of transformation and refinement. His tests reveal what is in our hearts, and His Word tells us what is good and what we can do about the rough spots. Now, don't be disheartened, though. God is on our side, and He will help us. Job 23:10 tells us, He knows the way that I take, and when He has tested me, I will come forth as gold. And then 1 Peter 5:7 adds, the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. The refining process is unique for each of us, but we all feel the burn. Did you know 3 New Testament Greek words are used for trial? Check these out. Perosis alludes to going through the fires of suffering for the purpose of refining one's character. Perimimosis implies God is testing our commitment. Will we remain faithful to Him, or will we give in to temptation and sin? And then document refers to the refiner's fire and proves one's faith is genuine. After being tested, faith remains. Hey, I get it. We don't have to know these Greek words for trial to know that trials are painful. What's helpful, though, is knowing there is a reason and a purpose for our suffering. And if there's a common thread among all of us, it's that sometimes we're in the fires of adversity. Listen, I can't fathom what Job went through. You can read his story in the book of Job. It's in the Old Testament. Yet, through his suffering and great loss, he became spiritually mature and remained faithful to God. And then there's Abraham. He waited years for Sarah to conceive a child. During those days of waiting and conflict, Abraham's faith was strengthened. Then later, when God asked for what we considered to be unthinkable, to sacrifice his son, Abraham trusted God and obeyed. And he worshiped when his son was spared. And we can't talk about trials and suffering and strong faith without mentioning King David. Known as the man after God's heart, David describes his darkness in Psalm 32. David refused to confess his sin with Bathsheba. You can read that story in 2 Samuel chapters 11 and 12. For an entire year, His guilt and shame were like this heaviness pressing on his shoulders. He writes that his vitality was turned into the drought of summer. For clarification, vitality means the capacity for survival or for the continuation of a meaningful and purposeful existence. Wow, what a seriously dark time in David's life. Lively character, gone. Mental vigor, absent. Active, not much. But God. Don't you just love saying and reading these two precious words? For one purpose or many, God used David's, Abraham's, and Job's trials to help them grow in perseverance, endurance, spiritual maturity, transformation, and refinement. And He does the same for us. And always for His glory, which points us and others to Him. Isaiah 32 reminds us it's good hope. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, nor shall the flames scorch you. Oh, that we may train our hearts to see God in our trials. Our gal Esther spent 1 year in preparation before she was complete and equipped to go before the king. We can't speculate on everything Esther endured, but we know the oil and spices absorbed into her body produced a lovely fragrance. What a beautiful picture of what God is accomplishing in us. Like Esther, we'll undergo a beauty treatment that produces a pleasing aroma. Recall 2 Corinthians 2:15, for we are the fragrance of Christ. God's polishing prepares us for what we're headed into. God's polishing purges iniquities and impurities of our heart. His polishing strengthens us for action and enables us to let go of the baggage weighing heavily upon our hearts. His polishing makes us shine so others are drawn to Him, and His polishing teaches us to trust Him. Viewing the polishing process through this lens helps us submit. We can anticipate a marvelous outcome. During our 4th week, we'll talk about the refiner, the fires of refinement, and the victory to follow. On day 1, let's talk about the refiner. On day 2, we'll talk about how to stay anchored. On day 3, we will discuss genuine joy. And day 4, oh girl, you're grounded. And on day 5, remaining faithful. Oh, Mark 9 verse 24 says, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And as God helped Esther, He'll help us meet adversity with courage and boldness. Have a great week, my friends. See you soon.